Hello, hello, hello. I'm Chris Ferguson, your host of You Championed Yourself. Who are you? It's always been a dream of mine to showcase people who have taken their dreams, their ideas, and turned them into their reality. As they reach beyond their personal struggles, their personal pains, their traumas, where so many people give up, these people push through their obstacles and their challenges, not knowing where it's going to take them. But they're trusting themselves enough not to give up, to do the follow through in personal life, in their career, in their relationships, for their dreams. This is who I call a champion. Today, we have an amazing individual with us today. Her name is Melisa Keenan, and she's a bestseller author. We're going to be talking about that. We're going to be talking about other things going on in her world. So let's just welcome Melisa into the podcast. Hello, hello, hello. How are you?
Hi, great.
Everyone, I always start with everybody has a backstory. Everybody has something in their life that triggered them to say, this is not me. This is what I want. What was that backstory for you, Melisa? I somehow I've got a Lisa in my brain.
Well, my name is unusually spelled also. It's Melisa. So I
Uh,
had a best friend in high school who would always call me Melisa instead of Melissa. Yeah, well, let it slide.
oh, thank you, thank you, thank you. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. So I do. I think of kind of two different parts of my life where that rang really true. What you said about like knowing this is not who I am. One of those was in my marriage. We had been married for about 5 years and uncovered some really deep-seated issues that I didn't even know were there. I didn't even know were a problem. And it really brought me to my knees because we had 3 kids, ages 4 and under, and all were in diapers still. And
Mm.
I was a stay-at-home mom, and I actually asked my husband to move out for. He was out of the home for 6 months, where we tried to just figure out like what needed to happen and how we could mend things. And that was definitely a moment of like, this is not like who I'm meant to be. This is not the life I'm meant to live. But it's interesting because I also go back to a time in my childhood. I think as children, we're so much wiser than we give ourselves credit for. Because as a child, I was experiencing a ton of abuse, and my parents were really struggling, drugs and violence, mental health issues, um, and being in those circumstances too, there was something really deep in me that was like, this is not who you are meant to be. Like this victim in this chaotic situation. This is not who you're meant to be at all.
I relate to that because I was orphaned at 8 with 5 other brothers and sisters, and they just walked away. My dad was a miserable alcoholic. My mother was physically violent and verbally abusive. And so I've walked that mile where my brother became a drug dealer in high school. He was the president, the class president of the school. That's why he was so popular back in the 70s, because that's who he was. And so the fact is that through all of this, I learned hate. I learned hate for life. I learned hate for everything and anyone that didn't have my best interest, but I wouldn't trust anybody. So I didn't know if they had my best interest for me. So
Yeah.
I was running solo. So it was like, okay, we've got to start thinking here.
Yeah. Yep.
We've got to start making some hard choices that I wouldn't wish on an 8-year-old ever.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when you're in that situation, you're punting with no experiences, no support system, and nothing to guide you. And that's when people, I know it was a turning point for me. And it's usually turning points in a lot of people's lives where they say, wait a minute, I didn't do anything wrong. I shouldn't be in this situation. This is about other people. It's not about me. God, creator, universe, whatever you call it. What's my purpose? Show me the path.
Yep.
And that's what I get transpired for you.
Yep. Yep.
And so what's really important that I always put this out for my listeners is that our relationship we have with ourselves is the most important relationship of our life. Because it teaches us how to treat ourselves. And it shows us that unconditional love so that we can accept that and learn from it and then become our own unconditional love. And most women learn this when they have children because they would die for their children no matter what. And there's not many people that would say that. But for a mother, it usually is, unless there is addiction or unless there is violence or loss of control, manipulation. How did you get out of that? How did you progress as a teenager up through until you got out of all of that?
Well, I think that that as a child, the message I internalized was you're not enough. And so I would just hustle through life. And hustling got me really far, actually. Like I was constantly trying to prove really to myself that I was enough. Like sitting in the front row in school, trying to get the best grades, studying the hardest, doing pageants, being the head cheerleader, whatever I could do. It was my survival tactic to prove myself. And, but it was also super exhausting. So when I found myself later in that situation, separated from my husband with my 3 little kids, and I had worked so hard to have this image of like perfectionism and stuff again, because it was all about survival, that it was like, it's all out the window, like everything we worked so hard for, our happy, smiling church faces and, with our perfect outfits and whatever, it didn't matter anymore. And I really did have that moment. So it took me, I had, again, 3 children at that point, ages 4 and under. But I actually remember this moment where I felt like the mantle of motherhood kind of fell on my shoulders. And I finally felt like, you are a mother. And that completely and directly coincided with me deciding to mother myself, because I had never had that, bits and pieces until I was about 6, but I really didn't have, someone to help me learn how to fit in the shoes that I stepped into at that young age, And so I started doing that, and that's how I found self-love. That's how I found this like nurturing way of being, and the ability to soften a little bit more in life. So, I looked at my marriage, and certainly my husband had his own issues that he was going through, but I could clearly see now, like, oh my goodness, being married to me was hard. I was like, in the hustle, proving, perfectionist, controlling energy all the time. So,
That's tough. That's tough. Well, me, I was tough, but it was because I was so independent. I didn't know how to be dependent on someone else. And for me, that was the hardest thing. So when my first marriage, I fell in love with the first man that paid me any kind of attention, serious attention. I'm thinking, okay, this is love. It's the furthest thing from love. And it was hard. It was really, really hard. And he wasn't there emotionally, mentally, physically a lot. He was in the military, but he volunteered for a lot of flying because he was a pilot to go out and fly and be gone for 30 days. He volunteered to do it. It's not like he was sent overseas in a conflict or something like that. I could understand it. But when you volunteer, you come home for the weekends and then you go golfing for 18 holes on Saturday, 18 holes on Sunday, and then you're gone back. You're gone. Wow. That's not a life. That's just an existence.
Yeah.
So I get it. So I absolutely, when I had my daughter with him, his mother came and all of a sudden she says, son, let me take the baby home with me for a month and then I'll bring her back to you. I just had her. I literally just had her. And I said, no. You felt that in your heart space. Did you not feel that in your heart space? Would you give up your child after just 2 days of having your child on this planet you carried for 9 months? Yeah.
No.
And I said no. And that was a huge conflict. It was a huge conflict. And
Wow.
that's when I knew the marriage was over. I knew that I didn't matter. I wasn't of value. I wasn't of worth. I was just
Mhm.
the package that brought this child into the world, and nothing else mattered.
I think you bring up such a good point, because so often when we're so young like that, we do approach love from our wounding. We don't know any other way to do it. We're just doing the best we can. And so we approach love from our wounding, and it's interesting because for some we can work through it and end up coming up with something beautiful. And I think that's always possible if both people are willing. And then there are other times, like in your situation, where it's like, no, like this is not this is not going to work. And I think it's commendable to be able to say, to look at things clearly and say, no, this is where the line is drawn, and I'm not going to just sit here and be complacent. Because I meet so many women who stay in
Mm,
relationships that don't work for years and years and years and years, and they may say, well, it's because of the children, or well, it's millions of other reasons. But at the end of the day, it's because they're afraid of being alone, and they don't know if they're worthy of anything better. And we got to look at that
yes,
stuff.
absolutely. Yes. I love that. I love that. I love that. In fact, when I was, after I got divorced, I was raised Catholic as a small child, got my first Holy Communion, and ended up in, I had my first Holy Communion in May and ended up in an orphanage in June. So I had my daughter. My ex-husband kept going off and volunteering to go on TDYs because in Mississippi, where he was stationed at, divorce court happened every 3 months. And if you weren't there and present, it'd get pushed off and pushed off and pushed off and pushed off to the next one. And he would conveniently be out of the country, flying around. So
Mm.
after 2 years, the judge said, "Where's your client?" to his attorney. And I raised my hand. He goes, "What?" And I said, he's volunteers to go out of the country intentionally so he can prolong this divorce. I said, "I come from Colorado every 3 months to show up for this." And he goes, "Granted."
Wow.
Because I told him, I said, ask his attorney. He can tell you. He's gone off flying, and he would fly and he'd be gone for 30 days, knowing that those court dates were in that 30-day time frame. So the fact was, is it was his way of just being an idiot. Well, a year after my divorce, I ended up with uterine cancer, and it had to do with my delivery of my daughter, because they gave me a saddle block, which is an epidural in the back, and it didn't take. It didn't work, and they didn't know anything about it. So I'm delivering her. They're cutting my episiotomy, and I'm feeling everything. And they're saying, "Oh, no, you're not feeling anything. That's just nerves." So when they untied my legs, I picked up my legs and I said, "Do you believe me now? I have felt every ounce of this." Doctors freaked. So the fact was, is I had laid on the sheet I delivered on for 6 hours, and I caught a staph infection, and it progressed from there. So at the age of 22, I had uterine cancer, and now I had to have a partial hysterectomy because of it. And I lost my worth. I lost my value, because who's going to want to marry a single mom with a 2-year-old child who can't have any more children?
And that
And
stuff is real. I mean, that's
it is.
real.
It is. But the thing was, is it's all those doctrines that you go through. It's all those teachings that you go through that we hurt ourselves most over, because as a child, I had to do catechism. I went, I actually skipped Catholic school one day with my brother. He was in the 5th grade. I was in the 2nd grade, but I decided to go with him. I just hung out with him. And I got kicked out of Catholic school because I cut school at 2nd grade. I was a bad influence, they thought.
Oh, wow.
So it's like, it wasn't even that. It was, I just wasn't going to let my brother go at it alone. Nobody does when kids skip school. Parents don't realize that. They're with their friends hanging out somewhere doing something. So,
Yeah.
but I love the fact that you are an anchor in the world for intimacy. And there's so many women who don't know how to be intimate with themselves and vulnerable enough to accept their portion in a relationship and that they were wrong and that they need to reflect. Can we talk about that?
Yeah, I really think that what you said is true. It's so scary for us. It's like I compare it to having a tiger in your closet, and you can hear it clawing, and eventually it's going to break out, but you're just doing everything you can to keep it in there. And then when you finally decide you're willing to go in and do some inner work and look within, and you open the closet door, it's like a stuffed animal. You're like, oh, you cry, it hurts, but it's not as big as you think it is ever. Never. I don't care what you've done or how bad you feel like things really are. That really is the first step to loving and accepting yourself. And if we don't do that work, we will never be deeply seen and known by another. No one can see me and know me deeper than I know myself.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so often I hear women, it's like all of our like secret desire to be really seen and known and valued for the essence of who we are, not what we can do, but who we are, not even how smart we are, like who we are on the core, on the inside. And yet it's like, but how many messages are you sending that are saying like, don't see in here. I can't let you in.
I actually help women shine their lights because women don't celebrate themselves. They don't celebrate their accomplishments. They don't celebrate the from where they were to who they are now and the path that it took to get here and the stamina and the courage it took to step up for themselves. I just finished reading a book called The Divine Sophia. And it talked about the god and goddesses of over 250,000 years ago and the divine feminine and how politically the men demonized women. The men turned women against men and were less valuable than a cow or a chicken or eggs when once they were held equal in status. And we have to get back to that. But because we've been put in this place for centuries and centuries and centuries, it's going to be a hard place to be, because I know in my world, in law enforcement, in corporate security, I was the assistant security director of Sawgrass Mills Mall, which is the second largest attraction in South Florida. Wow. And if I had to enforce the rules, I was being that bee, I was being aggressive. Well, no, I'm following the rules. You broke the rules. That doesn't make me a bee. That makes me an enforcer saying I'm not going to tolerate bad behavior. Then when I got into, I got down there and I started working with gangs with the Juvenile Delinquency Gang Prevention Council in Miami-Dade and Broward County, which is Fort Lauderdale. And I was an investigator. I didn't have a gun. I have a bulletproof vest. I didn't have any of that. And I'm breaking up fights. I'm taking people down. I'm helping all the law enforcement officers and the multi-agency gang task force identify through the businesses how this is affecting businesses. I stopped 3 kids that had just committed a burglary of a vehicle and stole a gun.
Wow.
So, I mean, I was that person, but that's who I was in life because those were my survival skills. I was that tomboy.
Yeah.
So each one of us as women use different understandings of our perspective to try to survive.
Yes.
But look at it this way. You're at 100% of surviving. You've done an amazing job. Yeah. Have you ever said, wow, I am so grateful that I am here today because there was so many other options I could have taken or choices I could have made.
So true.
And so when I talk about intimacy, I'm not talking about sex. I'm talking about getting to know you for you, not what you were told as a kid, not what you experienced and grew up in all those traumas and pains, but get to know yourself and realize what happened to me as a child, I had no control over. Legally, mentally, emotionally, I had no control over it. But when I hit 18, bar the door, Katie, because here comes the bull. And I had control in my life. And I had made the decision at 8. I was not going to go down the same path my parents did.
Yeah.
That was my pivotal moment. So every person has that pivotal moment. Unfortunately, in my life, I've had 3 near-death experiences. And so I had these spirit guides helping me, hiding me, protecting me in my life and making me bulletproof for all the things that I did and all the times that I'm taking down. Guys, I was bench pressing 200 pounds. What woman at 160 pounds can bench press? I mean, I was a correctional officer at a men's prison.
Wow.
I then went to the school board and became a security specialist, and I'm breaking up. We had 3,000 students. I'm breaking up gang fights. I'm breaking up between boys, between girls, armed robberies, strong arm robberies. I'm defending people on rape charges, all kinds of crazy stuff. Everything that happens in a city happens with these kids. And every parent says, not my child. I had 4 girls make 4 false allegations against boys because they had sex with the boy willingly, unknowingly knowing it was recorded in the stairwell of the school, and then turn around and want to file a police report when they wouldn't dump their girlfriends and make them their girlfriends because they wanted that prestige of dating that jock, that sports guy, the cool one. I had never had to defend a boy on a rape charge in my life. And it was hard, but I saw their beings and I had the tapes. And so when their parents came to school to see the police officer for the city that worked at the school, the SRO, they said, we want to press charges. He goes, you might want to talk to my security specialist here first because you might want to rethink that. Oh, no, my daughter said. Okay. So I told the parents that, it was consensual, it was willing. But this is how teenage girls are understanding life. And that was back in the 2000s. Who knows what it is today? So when it came out with this, what do you think of the Me Too movement? I'm curious. Since you talk about intimacy and divine feminine.
Well, I think it's been a gift for a lot of people. I think, with anything you can take it too far. But I do think it's been a gift in terms of women being able to feel validated that they're not alone. Like women haven't been able to share, yeah, I was sexually abused by this and that, and I had these experiences. But then it is interesting because I think, as with anything, when it comes to the feminist movement, like we struggle to find our core, our truth, like we've been talking about this whole time. Instead, we swing to the other side of the pendulum, and now it's like, how can I use this for gain? How can I use this to like usurp power or show that I'm better than men or whatever? And so we swing that pendulum, which again, that's like, it's human nature, I think. But what we miss in that is we're still missing who we really are when we do that.
Well, I agree with you in that, but I also see the flip side of the coin, having to defend boys against rape charges because they want to hang out with the jock of the school or the football hero, and they're willing to file false claims.
Yeah.
Me as a woman, it makes me angry because it now reinforces to men that this is why women have been demonized. This is why women have been put in their place. This is why, because back in the 70s, most people do not understand the way it was back then or even before that, because the understanding and the society norms of that time was, oh, she asked for it. She dressed too provocatively. She wore makeup. She did this. She asked for it. And so most times they were even unheard and unseen. And it
Right.
was that demonization of it. And it's like, well, she wore a miniskirt. Well, that was the style of the times.
Mm-hmm.
So you're going to say I can't wear a miniskirt and be trendy?
Yeah.
That opens me up for sexual assault. But then I see now where I was a kid when the women were burning their bras in the 60s, late 60s. I was like, why would you do something like that? You buy a bra to help yourself. Why would you burn it? But then I was a tomboy and I never let anybody tell me or define me for who I was or wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's where women, like you said, have a hard time understanding who they are so that they know what they are and what their worth is and what their value is. But in the meantime, when you have all these women that are alleging Me Too that happened 30 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
and there's no proof and there's no witnesses and there's no evidence, I, as a woman, get upset because now I know it's political. Now I know it's abusive. Now I know. So you're placating and making us all look bad. That's how I saw it. That's how I see them. Because we don't have a feminist action because they're not out for all women. They're only out for specific groups inside of that. And that showed during the politics
Right.
in 16, because women who were pro-life were not allowed to march with women who felt their voices weren't heard because they were pro-life. It doesn't matter. It should have been all women.
Yeah.
If you're serious about your intimacy, your vulnerability, your shadow work, your love as an individual, you should have had that sisterhood and allowed all women to march and be cohesive instead of agenda or categorizing.
Yeah.
Because then you become just as bad as the people that label you.
Yeah. Yep.
So as you go through, where do you see you going in the future? I love this conversation. We could talk for hours. I'm just saying.
So currently I help high-level business women to deepen intimacy in their relationships because when we actually show ourselves and the universe that we care enough about our intimacy and our personal relationships to invest our time and money there, then we actually expand everything in our lives. It absolutely helps us in our work in the world and our impact in the world and our income that we're calling in. And then my husband and I help couples to create this beautiful polarity and deeper intimacy in their relationships. And I love working with business women because I think when they help their inner vessel, they are then going to have a ripple effect on so many others that they're influencing. I think business women are some of our most powerful, most influential people on the planet. So
that's very powerful because in the Native American, my father's Native American, women were in high positions. They had the last word. It was the women. They would go to council. They would talk. Everybody would come together. The chiefs. There was women chiefs. There was women that wore headdress. They were considered that high. And so the fact is but they understood the divine feminine and the divine masculine, and that we have it both inside of us.
Yeah.
I'm grateful that you're doing this because as a woman in business, and a woman that's been a chief, a security chief of unit management, facility duty officer at a jail, in these female positions, and usually my whole life has been in a male dominant career field. And so when I was in my 20s, I started working at a police department and I tested for police officer. And I was number 2 out of everybody that tested. And they were looking for 2 officers. Well, thing was, is they hired the guy that got number one. And I worked at the police department, so they knew my worth ethic. They knew how far I did, what I did. I've been evaluated for there. And they decided to pick number three. And I found out, and I was told, it's because your name's Chris and not Debbie. Evidently, the chief of police had a something for the name Debbie. And so they had a nepotism clause, but they hired a detective's brother-in-law instead. So I understand. I was part of that time where women weren't given choices. Women were labeled. Women were not allowed to be. And to this day, that same department still has a hard time hiring females because they don't mind you being a dispatcher. They don't mind you being a matron. They don't want any part of a female on the street. But then that's the dominant male understanding of a small town community. So as women, I think all of us should understand that what we do in our everyday of life, how we show up for ourselves and show up for other women. I'm grateful. I met a woman who was a police officer back in the 50s, and that was unheard of. And she helped mentor me and to guide me and talking about the pitfalls of being in law enforcement in a small town. And so that helped out tremendously. However, the problem is that, it doesn't get you where you want to be, but you keep going and you keep pushing forward. And one of the things I wish for all women, please understand that you can do anything. No matter who you are, no matter your circumstances, you can do anything. Because when I moved to Tennessee, I decided I wanted to get post-certified in Tennessee as a police officer and went through the police academy. I was the oldest in the class. I wasn't the fastest, but I wasn't the slowest. And I outran 19-year-olds, 20-year-olds, 30-year-olds, 40-year-olds. There was some amazing people there that were super, super physical. But at 60, I was outrunning all these other individuals that at that age, I would have beat them too. Because I was an athlete. I was a swimmer. And so the fact is that's what helped hone me and teach me discipline in my life. So I honor you for what you do for women in business because they second guess themselves. They do knee-jerk reactions. They want to respond as a male, and that's not the response. Not to say that response is wrong, but it's not the same understanding. It's harmonizing.
True. It's not our truth. I think that's the beauty of it. And for someone like you to have gone through all these different life experiences and been in, what's typically like your macho man jobs and stuff like that, to have that understanding and knowing to be able to come back to your own divine feminine, which is separate and aside from all these roles that you're playing in your life, is so huge and is so rare. Because we do feel this need to like compete. So then when we're showing up in that way out in the world, then when we come back and show up that way in our marriage, think that that's going to be like a positive breeding ground for marriage. It's not. It's really not. And then what I find too is so funny is that so often as women will be like, I'm so tired. Like, I feel like I have to be in charge of everything. I have to do everything. I have to be on all the time. But it's like, when was the last time you invited somebody else to do something for you, or you leaned in and trust somebody else to be the leader, or, these kinds of things. And so this is what I really help women with, is because all that comes from trauma, whether it's your own personal childhood trauma or just the trauma of being born as a woman today. And any of us can just go back one or two generations in our DNA and our ancestry and find women who were deeply oppressed. So that's in our DNA to like fight back and resist. And that's a gift. And also we can use that as a sword against ourselves. We don't need to.
It's absolutely true. And but see, that's what I love it, is that you see it too. And I love the fact that at your age, you see it too.
Oh.
because there's a lot of women that don't see that. They think that they have to go through life and they have to be as good, or they have to outshine, or they have to do, no, just be yourself, do your best. Don't get caught up into the gossip and drama and the chaos, and keep stepping forward. Every day's a new day to create something in your life.
Mm-hmm.
But I graduated 12 weeks later, 15 pounds lighter. I graduated. And so I was working at the sheriff's department, but I was also working in education. I was a reserve deputy up here. And they were stunned that I graduated. So many people thought just because I said I'm going to go do it, that I would fail. And that's that in me, that's that core at 8. I was like, no, I'm not failing. I can do anything. Watch me. I'm not going to tell you. I'm just going to show you. And I think if you do it that way, you have a better understanding. But the fact is that when I was in corrections and I was in a penitentiary where 65% of the inmate population were sex offenders, you don't go out there to show them anything. You don't want to teach them a lesson. There's no lessons to be taught. They have a whole different mindset. So you go out there to enforce the rules because they were judged by a pair of there's 12, or took a plea bargain, and they're doing their time. Don't do their time with them, because it's so negative, and you're dealing with the ugliest part of life, of humanity. Mm-hmm. And when you learn that lesson, you just sit there and I think this is one of the times that I really connected with myself. And I thought, oh, this guy came up to me and said, I shouldn't be in here. I was having an epileptic seizure and I don't remember molesting 4-year-olds. And I just, the thought in my head, Melissa, was that, do you think I'm stupid? Do I look like, as a female, I'm going to understand that comment? So I explained the anatomy and told him the last thing that was going to become erect is his penis, and to get the F away from me and never speak to me again, because he's lucky right now that I was in the control housing and not out there toe to toe with him. But you try to make excuses. And I think women make excuses for bad behaviors of themselves and other people. And when they stop allowing those excuses, they can see their core. They can see their inner side. They can become that vulnerable warrior, feminine warrior that has divine masculine harmonized in them, and become their best version of themselves.
I agree. The other thing that I see, with what you're talking about is, I think so often we're so on guard in situations because we've either been in situations like you've been in. Your life is the most extreme example. Or I was even just raised watching the news, and every day on the news, it's another story about a woman or a child getting raped. And so you grow up in these, it's like you need to be on guard because you're a woman and you're weak. And being a woman equals being weak. And you're probably not going to survive. So you need to be on guard at all times. Mm-hmm. But then what happens is all of that, it gets embedded in us. And then we struggle trusting the people in our lives who are worthy of being trusted. Mm-hmm. I think that's the deeper work that I'm here doing. It's like I often will work with women who are in really decent, lovely marriages to really decent, lovely human beings. And it's like they'll say to me, I know that I'm married to a good man, but there's like that last layer that I just can't let go. I can't let him mm-hmm. in. And it's because of all of this, all the things that we've seen and we've taken in over the years. We've got to find ways to heal that so that we can let those who are safe in, so that we can soften and so that we can have safe spaces where we can rest. Because it's in those spaces where our real beauty, our real creativity comes out, those gems that we were meant to bring in and birth into this world. It doesn't come when we're in survival and like kind of always on guard and triggered. But I find so often women who have been extremely capable and pulled themselves out of any victim situations, they've created beautiful lives for themselves. They still approach their marriage and their relationships and their world as if they're in, their previous situations or in dangerous situations, and still don't know how to create the safety for themselves.
One question though, I while you were talking and talking about that, is that I'm wondering if some of that isn't a past life for some women, because this has been going on for so long, that when they get to that last little bit, big thing in society for the last 20-25 years is become disposable. So nobody invests in relationships, long-term relationships.
Mm-hmm.
And that's sad.
Mm-hmm.
However, if you don't have the trust in yourself, to trust your intuition, to trust your love for yourself, how are you supposed to trust somebody else?
Yeah.
How are you supposed to allow them in?
Yep.
So from a child that had no love in my life, I've been married now for almost 40 years to the same guy.
Wow.
And so the fact is, and we were both in law enforcement. We were both, dealing with kids. Our children didn't have a chance. They just didn't have a chance. Because my daughter at one point, she wanted to be liked. So she was hanging out with some troublemakers. And you don't know, I'm prepared to go to hell and back for my child to prevent you from sabotaging yourself in your future.
Mm-hmm.
And I told that to somebody, because it was like somebody filed a complaint against us saying that we locked our daughter up in her bedroom and only fed her vegetables. I'm serious. I'm dead serious. Well, the thing is my daughter loves vegetables. So yes, I do feed her that. But I'm down. I have to tell you this short story real quick. I'm down with the gang task force down in Miami-Dade. My husband calls me. He's home on his lunch hour. He says, honey, you got to come home. DCF is here. Children and Family Services are here. We've been accused of abuse of our daughter. I said, what? He says, you got to come home. I said, I'm in Miami. He says, you got to come home. I'm not even going to talk about what I did. I could have probably given myself 5 tickets if I had thought about it. But I got there and I got home and I said, listen, I showed her my ID. I said, I'm prepared to go to jail to keep my child out of gangs. That's how far I'm willing to go. My husband's like, oh my God, don't say that. Don't say that. Don't say that. And I'm like, no, I'm here. I'm telling you, kids need somebody that's going to say, use me as a bad guy. Use me. I tell them, my mom will whoop my tail.
Yeah.
And she saw everything. Supposedly there was locks on all the doors. I made her go upstairs and check. Her room was a real bad show going on as a teenager, but whose teenager's room isn't all immaculate? So, but there was no locks. She had just came home from the beach with her friends, sticking a Big Mac in her mouth as she opened up the door for the lady. And she says, do you feel like, the lady said to her, do you feel like a prisoner in your own home? Typical teenage response. Yeah, I do. So it was unfounded, of course, but it was the fact that I told her, I said, whoever you're hanging around with has messed with the wrong woman. For the next 7 weeks, the entire gang task force followed these little wannabe gang members all over town. Finally, she came home. She goes, I have no friends. I said, that's the whole point. You need better friends. I said, and tell your friends when they really want to play adult games, come see me. We can talk, or I can help them now. So that's how I stood out. And I blatant, upfront, forward. But I just am confused about why women think they're not enough. Because you can't convince me that I wasn't enough, but you could convince me I wasn't loved.
Mm-hmm.
And so even through my shadow work as a shamanic practitioner of 45 years and walked those miles is how I found the divine feminine in me, and I harmonized the divine masculine. And I don't see people, I see human beings. And I see people who make bad choices. But it's not for me to judge. It's not for me to assume, and it's not for me to label. And that's my wish for humanity. Because if we don't label and we don't judge and we don't make assumptions, life would be so much better when we wish everybody the best. So I, again, am so excited. I'm so honored, Melissa, you're here, because there's not enough women speaking out. It's not that it's the right way, but it's with love and light. There's no agenda. There's no hidden message. And that's what makes this so real, raw, and rare. And I want to thank you for doing that.
Thank you.
But me, I'm just, it's not even the cop. It's the street kid that comes out of me. And the street kid in me, when you're 14 and you run away from the orphanage and you're sleeping under a bridge in Colorado Springs and it's cold in the wintertime and survival takes on a whole new meaning, you become grateful. You become very grateful for everything and anything you have. And I think people get away from that understanding that it could be different to an extreme level at any point in time. So with that, again, if people wanted to reach out to you to use your services, how would they do that?
Yeah, either my website, which is melisakeenan.com, MELISAKEENAN. I have a free intimacy guide there that you can sign up to receive right away in your inbox. It's like those first steps of intimacy with yourself. And then I also run a free women's Facebook group. It's called Women Manifesting Intimacy. So you can just search that up in Facebook and on every social media platform. And what I love to do is, I can sit here and share my story and my thoughts all day, but I actually really love to hear other women's stories. I love to hear what really shows up for women. And I think kind of one of the approaches to relationships that there's a gap or we're missing is that so often relationship experts are just out there studying the patterns and then trying to package up a solution and give it to you. But it doesn't work that way. Really, I believe every woman knows exactly what she most needs. Beyond any, expert. You can pay anybody enough money to tell me exactly how to run my life. But often, again, because of all of our trauma and the things we've experienced, we have trouble hearing that inner voice. And so it's just drawing that out. I love to just hold that space. And so if you do reach out to me, I love to, I definitely offer any of your listeners a complimentary call to just sit and hold that space and hear what shows up for you with intimacy, what your next level of intimacy would look like and what you really want to experience, and then help guide you to whatever resources I know of that can support that.
So I meant to ask you a question. What part, when you and your husband work together as a team, what is it that you do as a team? Because most people don't realize that you guys are like a couple in this.
Yes. So
can you explain that for me?
I personally work with women. I work with women and we talk about their relationships, and that's plenty, that's all wonderful. But for some people, and we kind of call this more our more exclusive offer, because we want that either one or both of the individuals in the couple have worked with either me or my husband initially, or they've done extensive inner work, because we're not really like last chance marriage coaches. We're more like, what's your next level? What's your how amazing can this get? Like, what amazing things can you create? So when my husband and I come in together, the woman has the option to do one-on-ones with me and also be a part of my group programs. And the husband will work one-on-one with my husband. And then we come together and we do sessions like 2-on-2 where we're talking as couples about what comes up as couples. And then included in that is a retreat where we personalize it to that couple. It's just for them. It's like whatever their goals are, whatever they're working on, and whatever we feel like will best benefit them to access that next level, then that's what we build into the retreat.
I love that. I love that. I just knew there was something I missed, or something something else that needed to be said before I said thank you. So
Okay.
do me a favor, don't go anywhere. I'll be right back. It takes a special kind of individual to dream their thoughts and their ideas and turn it into a reality. Melisa has done this with herself and her husband as a cooperative effort. And I love that. I absolutely love that. They've stepped past all of their fears. They've stayed the course. They had the courage through the follow through. Melisa, Keenan, you've championed yourself. Now we know who you've become. Thank you for sharing your ideas, your thoughts, your dreams, and how you help other people in their everyday life. Thank you.